cities during this year's Disruptive Innovation Festival. On opening night, Paul Mason said that cities will be the most important economic unit in the next 25 years. And then yesterday we released an animation from Sheffield University that outlined a vision for feedback-rich cities that mimic natural systems. Today we're going to dig in a little deeper and talk specifically to Elizabeth Yiwu, who is Vice President of City Solutions at 100 Resilient Cities.
Hello, Seb.
Welcome to the Disruptive Innovation Festival, a 3-week-long online event that showcases the latest ideas, innovations and technologies that are disrupting the future of the economy. My name is Seb Reed and I'm a member of the tech and facilitation team here at the DIF. I'm also an author at Circulate, a circular economy news-focused website. I'm really pleased today to be joined by Elizabeth Yiwu from 100 Resilient Cities, where she's Vice President of City Solutions. Previously, she worked as a banker in New York City and at many municipalities for around 16 years. Today, we're going to be talking about resilient cities and the future of cities. And I'd like to actually start off, Elizabeth, if that's okay, by asking you the question, what is a resilient city?
Hi, Seb. Thanks. And nice to speak with you all online today. Resilience is really for us a very broad and encompassing term. For a city, it really is this capacity to both manage through successfully and rebound following an unpredictable challenge or managing through the everyday shocks and stresses of life. So understanding, for example, and managing to a place where in the event there's an earthquake, that a community can grow and thrive in following that event, or potentially managing through also the everyday challenges of life, like traffic. Resilience really requires our cities to think holistically on a more integrated way, in an inclusive way, and to iterate on those resilience challenges and solutions. And so that after you face these challenges, or while you're facing these challenges, the stresses on an everyday basis, that you're thriving and continuing to grow as a city. And it's really looking to help our cities solve the multiple challenges that they have using the scarce resources that they have.
Great, thanks, Elizabeth. And I wanted to say that we're really keen to get your engagement, your questions, your feedback today on the session. And there are 2 main ways in which you can do that. One is via our social media channels using #ThinkDiff on Twitter, that's 1F. And the second is actually in the comments section right below this video embed. Send us through your questions and your comments and we'll be putting them through to Elizabeth over the next 45 minutes. I wanted to pick up on something you just said, Liz. By the way, fantastic skyline behind you there, around the idea of being ready for unpredictable challenges. And it's sort of, I guess there's an underlying implication to this idea of looking for resilient cities, that maybe cities haven't been designed with that intention in mind. I just wondered if you could say a couple of things about what makes this issue so challenging for cities today?
I think there are a number of reasons why resilience is challenging. We're facing these unprecedented threats that we never have before. And those 3 for being climate change, urbanization, and globalization. And those are affecting cities at a scale that we haven't seen. So, for example, we've got people flooding into our cities because they see them as the source of economic opportunity and growth. And cities haven't been equipped and designed for the masses of people that continue to flock to them on a daily basis. We've got this challenge of globalization where we're more interconnected than we ever have been before, thanks to technology, and impacts that occur in one city directly impact another city, even though they may not be in geographic proximity to each other. And then we've got this continued challenge of climate change. And for better or worse, most of our visionary forefathers thought that building cities on waterfronts and was a great place, and it is a great place for commerce. But as a result of climate change and sea level rise, our cities are facing challenges in that regard like they haven't before, and they weren't, in some instances, built to manage those challenges. So the impact and the confluence of those three areas make the urban resilience building challenge more imperative than it ever has been before, but also brings with it a new host of challenges.
Yeah, and I want to ask a little bit about your engagement with this work. So obviously you're the Vice President of City Solutions at 100 Resilient Cities. Can you just tell us a little bit about that program and how it works with cities?
Sure, I'm happy to. And so hopefully you all can see if I flip to the next slide. So 100 Resilient Cities was created by the Rockefeller Foundation to specifically focus on resilience building in 100 cities around the world. We selected those cities from over 1,100 different applications in 3 different rounds, and they were all based on city feedback and engagement with the mayors or the senior leaders of the cities to understand and their capacity and willingness to engage in this resilience journey with them. So we've picked 100 cities, and we are working with them to help them become more resilient to these social and economic and physical challenges that they're continuing to face in the 21st century. And we do that really in 4 different ways. We're challenging those cities to build their resilience, but in order to do that, it requires a senior leader in the city who is positioned to work transversally across the different city government areas, as well as with the citizens, to understand what the city's resilience challenges are. And that person that we work with the city to hire and integrate into their governmental structure is the Chief Resilience Officer. The second piece that the Chief Resilience Officer leads is a city resilience strategy, and that is an opportunity to understand and synthesize all of the different resilience challenges in the city, having had worked with both the government, the nonprofit, the academic, the citizens of the city to understand what are those challenges that need to be addressed in order to build a more resilient cities. The third piece of it is this platform of services to support the strategy implementation. And that is the part of the organization that my team and I are specifically responsible for building out and engaging with our cities around. So not only are we working with those different partners from the academic, nonprofit, and private sector to identify those solutions, but we're also helping guide our cities and work with them to implement those solutions and to use those tools and services to build more resilient cities. At the same time, we are also looking to inspire our member partners around resilience and have them better understand the challenges that our cities are facing in the 21st century so that they can design and help develop the solutions that we need in order to build more resilient cities. And then the fourth piece, which is critically important as well, is the network of Chief Resilience Officers, because we believe in what we've seen through our short time is that cities really don't have unique challenges. Many cities have shared challenges, and the solutions and ideas really need to scale if we're actually going to successfully address those challenges. And so having a network of peers for the Chief Resilience Officers who are all brand new in their roles, as well as for the network of partners to collaborate and develop and design solutions is a critical way that we're actually going to be able to scale our work through our 100 cities and beyond.
That's really interesting. I wanted to pick up on something that you just said about the idea that actually cities don't have unique challenges, which is intuitively quite surprising to someone like me who imagines that the challenges that a city like Rio de Janeiro face would be dramatically different than something you'd face in New York. I just wonder if you could describe some of the common challenges or the similarities that you found in cities.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And Seb, I had the same theory as you, and then I started working here at 100 RC, and I actually realized how much there were shared journeys and similarities and challenges. And so I just wanted to hit a few of the trends that we're seeing across our cities, and then just give you a couple of examples. So, for example, one of the key trends that we're seeing across our city network is inequality, and both between the haves and the have-nots. Another key trend that we're seeing across many of our cities is also migration, both from political reasons, but also economic. And that is causing this in-migration, this urbanization that we haven't seen at this scale before. The third piece was around water, and one of the things that we look at actually is our application data, and over half of our cities, more than half of our cities, have cited water as a key challenge that they think of as it relates to their resilience building. So both thinking about not enough water or water when you don't want it. I like in an example here in this picture around the flooding that many of our cities experience. And then the last piece is around infrastructure. More than half of the world's infrastructure has not yet been built. And that is a challenge and a concern for many of our cities as we think about how to design and what infrastructure we need in order to manage these growing cities that are also susceptible to climate change. So these key trends transcend all cities. They are not limited to just one or two. For example, our cities of Melbourne, Boulder, and Durban are all thinking about biodiversity and thinking about how potentially urban forest and tree canopy can actually help build their resilience, not just from a sort of aesthetic scale, but also thinking about reducing urban heat island, about thinking about managing stormwater, and thinking about where also there are a lot of trees in the city and where there aren't, and potentially linking that back to the inequality agenda and making sure that everyone has adequate amounts of green space.
And that's very interesting. Just actually be interesting for our viewers, I suppose, to understand the breadth of the different kinds of cities you work with. I mean, you're called 100 resilient cities. Do you work with 100 cities, and what's the geographical spread of those?
Sure. So yes, we are working with 100 cities. We just completed our last round of applications earlier this year to close out the final 100. And we're working across all of the continents, save for Antarctica, in all different capacities and functions. We have offices in London and in Singapore to help support our local efforts in those regions, as well as New York.
Well, you know what they say, if you're not in Antarctica, you're not truly global. We've had a question in about, I think it's also linked to a question that was raised a little bit by your intro to the way in which the program works. I think it's a two-part. So there's this resilience officer that's very key to the work you do and the, I guess, the individual applications of the program in different cities. And the question that's come in is, you know, what are the factors according to which they measure or identify resilience in cities? Are there things by which, you know, a judgment or a grade you give a city based on resilience, or is it a more qualitative, organic role that those officers play and your program is developed by?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about, and the way that I kind of read that question is, how do we measure resilience in cities, and what is the role of the Chief Resilience Officer? So I'll answer both of those questions. The first is in conjunction with the Rockefeller Foundation in Europe, we utilize the City Resilience Framework to help us understand what the key challenges are in cities. There are four, drivers. There's leadership and strategy, health and well-being, economy and society, and infrastructure and environment. And those are kind of the three kind of integration of those four key areas are kind of the start of resilience building. And then looking beyond that into these sub-drivers for each of them. So I think, Seven, you and I shared a little bit around like economic development. And so, you know, looking specifically at the economy and society, thinking about how urban systems foster economic prosperity, think about social stability and justice, and promote cohesive communities. Those are key elements, for example, in the economy and society framework relating to the city resilience framework. But not just looking at those in a silo. Looking at, for example, how fostering economic prosperity actually integrates across the diagram, across our city resilience framework, with ensuring long-term and integrated planning, because you can't have one without the other. And thinking about and using that city resilience framework to understand where the city is in terms of its resilience. In terms of measurement, we are actively working on the City Resilience Index, which we are sharing with several of our member cities to understand and measure what resilience looks like in their community, and what over time how that resilience building grows and changes. So that is currently something that's underway that we're working with them on.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I was thinking when you were talking about, inequality, water, migration, infrastructure as the sort of four key challenges that cities of today face. I guess the things that your program is aiming to tackle. It seems to me it's somewhat political. The politics of a city must play a significant role in how this plays out. How do you sort of manage that slightly tricky area, shall we say, when it comes to thinking about long-term and resilience, trying not to mention the US election?
I was waiting for that question. So we are very much, I guess I'll start from the beginning. I mean, when we select a city, we very much work with the mayor and the senior leadership of the city to understand their commitment and willingness to build resilience in their cities. Because honestly, we're not giving them money. We're actually asking them to change the way that they do work and build a more resilient city by working more transversally across their organization and with citizens in their communities. And so making sure that the senior leadership of the city is on board and ready for that challenge and excited to do it and to carry it forward. And making sure as well that they nominate and integrate this Chief Resilience Officer into their everyday working structure so that the Chief Resilience Officer can help advance that resilience building work in the city. For example, I think one of the interesting and great examples of how cities are truly integrating resilience into their everyday lives is actually an example from our city of New Orleans, where they have a resilience review committee look at the major capital expenditures that they're making and any projects that the city is doing to understand how this is actually contributing to the resilience building of the city. And that is, one way that senior leadership can help integrate and influence resilience into their communities.
Right, and I suppose to move on to another, one of those slightly trickier subjects. I mean, your background is in finance previously. I wondered if you'd give us a perspective on the role of finance in shaping the future of cities. Often there are budgets, which implies constraints, and I just wondered if you had any insights or thoughts on that for our audience.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to chat about that. That's a place that I get very excited about talking. What we challenge our cities to do is we know that each city has very scarce resources, not just from a physical standpoint, but also financially. And so part of building resilience is understanding how to use that scarce dollar more effectively to solve multiple challenges at once. So as opposed to just building a road, thinking about how that road actually, and ensuring that road doesn't bisect a community, but ensuring that road also is both connecting communities. What does it mean for economic development? Is there an opportunity to actually, lay fiber optic cable? A number of our cities have suggested that narrowing that digital divide is a critical piece. So how can we look at the investment in just a road to address some of the challenges? Can it be permeable pavement so that we actually reduce some of the stormwater challenges that a city might be facing? So really trying to optimize the use and implementation of a specific project so that we can make that dollar go further. At the moment, we've also created something called the 10% pledge, which many of our cities, I think about 28 or 29 cities have signed on to this 10% resilience challenge, where the mayor has committed that 10% of their annual budget will be dedicated to resilience building projects. So we see money moving towards resilience projects. And also thinking about as well, which is a project that we're working on here at 100RC, how do we get the financial community, institutional investors, philanthropic investors, really thinking about how to better quantify and understand the value of resilience from both a credit perspective as well as a repayment perspective, because there are significant benefits from doing projects in a more resilient way. It could potentially improve a city's creditworthiness, because, for example, you might be it might be a city that's very susceptible to sea level rise, but if that city, for example, better integrated parks, and looked at potentially some biodiversity solutions and other ways, as opposed to just potentially building a seawall, looking at all of these other different ways that a city can actually address some of the stormwater challenges or flooding challenges that it may face, by integrating the community, by providing more access to people, by connecting communities. That in turn could have the impact of increasing economic development along a waterfront, which in turn increases revenue, which in turn increases the city's budget, which then ultimately accrues positively to a city's credit profile. So thinking about all these different aspects of resilience and how it very much integrates with finance and getting these projects done is critical.
Well, you've certainly convinced me on that one. We've had a question in from Twitter, and just before I ask Elizabeth that question, I just want to remind you in the audience of how you ask your questions. You can do it via Twitter using the hashtag ThinkDiff with just one F, or even easier, just post it in the comments section below this video embed, and it may be a simple 1 or 2 click process to sign in to do that. But Liz, let me ask you this question. I think it's sort of a question where they're wanting to bring this to life a bit. I understand that it's a relatively new program and things don't necessarily move really quickly when it comes to massive cities. But they've asked, have you got any examples or case studies of a city that you've started working with where you've seen some real progress or movement towards being a more resilient city in some way? Are you at that stage yet?
Yeah, you're right. At the moment, we are still reasonably new in our process. We've released about 20 different resilience strategies that are all available on our website, so people can check them out. And so I feel like it's somewhat unfair for me to pick just one city as an exemplar of how they've really advanced their resilience journey. Perhaps I could just take a smattering of different cities that we believe, or I believe personally, that have done a great job of integrating resilience and continuing to advance it. One, I think I mentioned, for example, New Orleans, and using that resilience lens with which to evaluate and, sorry, one second, with which to evaluate projects. I think the other examples that are really exciting for us to see are the institutionalization of our chief resilience officers across our network. And thinking about, for example, in Da Nang, Vietnam, where I just was a couple of weeks ago, seeing that there's a huge commitment to resilience, that this chief resilience officer will continue in their role and continue advancing the resilience strategy and initiatives that Da Nang in Vietnam has identified as key things that they need to focus on to build more resilient cities.
Right. Okay. That's very interesting. And I mean, what sort of projects are we talking about tackling in the case of somewhere like Vietnam, for example? What sort of range of areas do they come up with or identify? Is that putting you on the spot a bit with that example? And I apologize if it is.
No, I mean, it always is. It's hard to remember every single initiative. Yeah. I think, for example, we were saying, I was working with the Mexico City team where we have over 100 initiatives. So as long as you don't quiz me on all 100, I think we'll be safe.
That might take longer than we have.
You're right. I think so. I'll just encourage our viewers and readers to check it out themselves. But the diversity of initiatives, I should say, there are a diverse range of initiatives, from housing to looking at risk transfer solutions to thinking about food supply. They're all different kinds of challenges that our cities face. And Seb, hopefully if I advance these slides, you can kind of see. I know this slide doesn't say too much that's right on the screen, but I'll just tell you the story behind it. I mean, this is a picture from Rotterdam where we had 8 different chief resilience officers, and you can see them all ascending the stairs. But this was a chance for 8 of them to actually come together and talk about some of the challenges around water that they're facing in the community. So we try to bring these cities together and at their own desire as well, to help solve and create the solutions that they need to, and to learn from each other. I think many of them, for example, Mexico City, just to go back to that, Arnaldo, our Chief Resilience Officer from Mexico City, went to the Rotterdam Exchange and learned about water plazas, and that's something that he thought about for his resilience strategy. And realizing that these challenges are universal, and the solutions don't need to be city specific, but cities can learn from each other and develop their solutions on a context specific basis.
Great, thanks for that response. I wanted to get your viewpoint on how the work of Resilient Cities sort of overlaps with other trends that we're seeing around cities. So a theme at the DIF and a term that's becoming a bit more common is this idea of regenerative cities. There's an initiative that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has launched called Circular Cities, focused on circular economy. How do you see resilience playing into those factors, if at all?
I see it a lot. And, the circular economy in particular is something that we've had several of our chief resilience officers really think about. In particular, I know Pittsburgh has been one that's been thinking very much about the circular economy and how to integrate that into their resilience building efforts. So, for example, just thinking more myopically, if you will, about the circular economy, one of the challenges that we're trying to work through in our city of Amman in Jordan is waste. And using that lens of, okay, here are the waste challenges in Amman. How do we manage through them? What is the infrastructure we need to build? What is the opportunity potentially to create a circular economy around waste? And that's in its very early infancy, but it's something that I think we need to think about as an element of resilience building in our cities.
Great, and we've got another 15 minutes or so with Elizabeth, and we're really ready for your questions. So do use the hashtag ThinkDiff on Twitter or the comment section below. I've seen a couple have already come in, and we'll put those to Liz in just a moment. But speaking about regenerative and circular cities, I wanted to give a chance for my co-host here, Leo Nutter, to offer a few thoughts on the events that we've got coming up at the DIF.
Great, so thank you, Seb. Fantastic conversation there, Liz. And for all of you watching at home, there's a multitude of events going on at the Disruptive Innovation Festival based on cities. Just go to the DIF website, go to the schedule, and you can filter by topic and just click on cities, and you'll see there are dozens of things going on about cities and the challenges that cities are facing. But before diving into a few sessions at the DIF that goes into cities, I just wanted to draw your attention to the Circular Economy European Summit that's happening next week. From the 15th to the 17th of November in Barcelona, there'll be hundreds of people gathering together to talk about cities and the role that they play and the challenges today and tomorrow. If you want to go, then go to circulareconomysummit.com. But if not, and if you don't have the money, then that's okay. The DIF is free. We're covering the summit right here in the comfort of your own home. So the first session from the summit that I wanted to highlight is cities as drivers for change. Now in this discussion between our very own Ellen MacArthur and the mayors of Medellin in Mexico and Barcelona, they'll be talking about how important cities are in transitioning towards a circular economy. This is taking place on the 25th of November at 1 p.m, so pop that in your personalised schedule. Also happening at the DIF, related to the summit, Ashima Sukhdev from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, she's the government and cities team lead here at the foundation, is going to be talking about her experiences at the summit. In the session, Cities of Opportunity, join us on the 24th of November at 5 p.m, right here in the Ellen MacArthur Foundation studio. And we've also got a great session coming up related to cities on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation stage. Melanie Nutter and Shyam Ramkumar will be talking about regenerative cities. So join us then on the 22nd of November at 3 p.m. Now don't worry if you've missed a couple of sessions that you really wanted to see. Throughout the DIF and for 1 month after the diff, we'll be running Catch Up. Now, I just wanted to highlight 2 very good animations that I aired yesterday on the Big Top Tent stage from the University of Sheffield Urban Institute. Regenerative Cities, the animation, and the Water Energy Food Nexus is available on Catch Up online at thinkdiff.co. Seb?
Thanks for that, Leo. Always good to have you. And it is worth highlighting that we do have an awful lot on Catch Up and available. I believe we've got a little clip for you now from Monday night's Diff Live launch, starting with Robert Scoble, who is a VR expert and perhaps nut. So have a look at this.
And then you click on it with your finger and zombies start crawling through the window and into your space. When I say mixed reality, that's what we're talking about. Now, it might sound like this thing is just for video games, but it's the most important education technology humans have ever invented.
How can 5 guys undercut a machine? The problem is we've created a social structure that is built on avoiding automation because of its social impact.
One thing that feels exciting to me about that when it comes to innovation following values is that if we value complexity and if we value systems thinking, then we value data, real data about products that we're developing.
When you start to see things in a circular way, you start to see innovation, creativity, and opportunity. There is a massive opportunity to decouple growth from resource constraints. There's an opportunity to regenerate soil.
In your revolution, in my one, in your one, in the one that Robert is talking about. Cities, I think, are probably going to be the most important unit of political decision making for the next 25 years.
That's just a taster of some of the catch-up opportunities that are available already on the Diff website, and it's only going to increase, and there'll be an even greater pool of content available for you to watch as we go through the 3 weeks. But it'll only be available for a limited amount of time, for the 3 weeks of the Diff plus 30 days afterwards. So do make sure that you take your chance to watch it while it's there. Also, make sure you take your chance to ask Liz your questions about cities, the future of cities, about the 100 Resilient Cities programme. She's yours for the next 15 minutes. I'm going to get to a couple of those questions that have come in a moment, but don't miss this chance to have a true expert of cities at your disposal. Actually, Liz, I wanted to get your feedback on what Paul Mason said right there. It's a quote that I stole for my introduction as well, so it's extremely popular in the session. So it seems fitting to bring you into this sort of triangular conversation, where he said, that cities, in his opinion, will be the most important economic unit over the next 25 years. Do you get that feeling from your work as well?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't firmly believe that. I do feel like cities are really the key to our future. That's where over half the world population is expected to live, or lives now, and is expected to grow to almost 3/4. So cities are the most critical asset that we have right now in terms of being an economic engine for our world. And I apologize, the sound cut out, so I couldn't hear all that you were saying. So hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, no, that answers as well. And actually, I just wondered if you might delve a little bit deeper into that in terms of, are there ways in which you expect that to manifest itself in terms of the way in which cities develop? Will there be an increasing, obviously the population of cities as well, well advertised as going up, but or is it more of a continuation of what you're already seeing?
I think the changes that we're seeing are unprecedented. I mean, we've got a huge in-migration to cities. I think when I was talking before, I talked about sort of the political migration. So some of the challenges related to the migration that we're seeing in our Greek cities in Thessaloniki and in Athens are unprecedented, caused by political conflict in other regions. We also see economic in-migration. When I was in Accra, that's the center of commerce for Ghana, or one of the, I should say. And so managing the people that are coming into those cities, ensuring that the city is built to manage them from an infrastructure perspective, but also the socioeconomic perspective of ensuring that there's jobs and livelihoods and opportunities for them to grow and thrive in those cities is a key area that, you know, if left unaddressed, the cities will not thrive because people come there for that economic opportunity, in addition to a myriad of other things. So thinking about cities as the unit of currency, if you will, for the 21st century and beyond.
Great, and that's a great answer. And sort of want to get to some of these questions we've got from the audience now. I don't want to hog the mic too much. So I think this sort of harks back a little bit to some of the things we were discussing earlier. And it's a question that says, how do you get buy-in from governments and cities that are particularly resistant to certain ideas? And the example in this question was actually climate change. So I'd be interested to get your thoughts on some of those challenges.
You know, I think it's really an interesting one, and it's a very fair point. And to me, there's kind of two stories that I'd like to tell. You know, one of them I think is you know, alignment with the national government. And I know, for example, I spent a lot of time with the city of Sydney, maybe it was about a year ago, and talking to Lord Mayor Moore. And thinking about, you know, her agenda and thinking about how it aligns in some instances, it might be different from the Australian national agenda as it relates to climate change, and thinking about, you know, how we actually bring those two pieces together in order to allow Sydney and our other cities who may have maybe sort of trying to advance an agenda that might be not consistent with the rest of the population, enabling them to do the great work that they need in order to build resilient cities. I think we've seen a change in some of our cities who are very focused on climate change and thinking about solely thinking about climate change, for example, and then thinking about how you need to actually pivot that example and not just thinking about climate change, but also thinking about how it affects the most vulnerable people. For example, because most of the vulnerable people can be living in most of the sort of climate susceptible areas. So on the riverfronts, on hillsides, and really thinking about the integration of climate change and some of these other pressing city priorities that need to be addressed. And working together on those, because perhaps other stakeholders might think, you know, housing is the big agenda, and other people might think climate change is the big agenda. And thinking about how do you actually marry those two together to develop the solutions that need to happen in order to build the city's resilience.
And yeah, to talk about big agendas, we've had a question in about smart cities. Personally, I find the idea of a smart city to be a bit of an oxymoron. And I've lived on a small island all my life. You never hear anything about smart islands. Yeah, so the question is, do you think a city can be truly smart? And I suppose to phrase that, additionally phrase that, you know, how does the smart cities agenda sort of overlap with resilience? Is it one that does solely, or is it one that's perhaps, you know, are there challenges that come with that sort of technological advancement as well for resilience?
So resilience building very much thinks about the smart cities agenda. It's a critical piece of it. It's understanding, for example, the data that's required in order to both help the city make better decisions, but also to help run a more efficient city. So for many of our cities, aggregating that data, understanding what data needs to be captured, and synthesizing it to make those decisions is a key element of resilience building. I know, for example, one of our partners is working with the city of Semarang in Indonesia to integrate the 18 different applications it currently has outstanding and look at them on a uniform basis to understand what all, you know, what it basically means for city governance and also efficiency. I think there's also a broader piece around smart cities in general and helping use technology to enable cities to run more effectively and efficiently, like we see, for example, in our city of Barcelona.
That's great, and I wonder if there's a somewhat connection here with another question that's come in. Often you hear about smart cities, and then people talk about, you know, the smart citizen. And there's a question about how are those citizens who are interested to work towards a greater resilience in their cities able to get involved? Is there a channel for civil engagement with the 100 Resilient Cities Network, or what would you recommend to citizens?
So all of our chief resilience officers are there to work with the citizens, and it's a key piece of our program. our program opens up in cities with something called an agenda setting workshop, where we work with a myriad cross-stakeholder engagement opportunity. Sorry, it's a cross-stakeholder engagement opportunity that we work on with the city to understand what the city's resilience challenges are. And for example, in our city of Boston, our Chief Resilience Officer, Atia Martin, spent time, if you know Boston, on the T and on the buses to understand from citizens locally what are those resilience challenges that we as Bostonians need to address. And for example, in Norfolk, Virginia, one of the things that we did was we actually did a Retain Your Rain workshop, because the city is very susceptible to stormwater and rainwater management challenges. And we worked with local citizens to get out there and design big buckets or cisterns that they could put in their community to help retain the rain and reduce some of the challenges that the stormwater system in Norfolk would otherwise have. So there are many opportunities in all of the resilience initiatives and also through our process for citizens to get involved.
I do know Boston. I was thinking whether I don't know if any of our audience members know Boston, whether the T is an example of great resilience because it feels like it's 200 years old, or whether it doesn't feel very resilient when you're riding it. We've actually got a question in, I think, that just give you an opportunity to talk a bit more about the program as well. So someone's asked, there are several frameworks around this idea of building a resilient city, and they mention C40 cities. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what makes your one stand out in your view, or maybe talk about some of the commonalities or differences between these initiatives. Are they all complementary, or is the 100 Resilient Cities Network the one to do it all, as it were?
Well, of course, we like to all think that we're the only one, but I don't think that's a very smart view of the world. I mean, we are very much working and actually are and trying to integrate all of the different various actors that are working in the city space. Philanthropic dollars are limited. People's capacity to act are limited. And we're only going to build these solutions through collaboration. So, for example, we do work with the C40 team and try to understand, what their priorities are, what our priorities are. Perhaps we approach them with a different lens, but we're all working together to help build more resilient and robust cities that will endure. And so that collaboration does actively occur across the different city networks. And if there are city networks out there that we're not aware of, please send them our way. We'd really love that broad collaboration across the different entities.
Right. And before we finish here, I just wanted to ask a question. So you've reached 100 cities, or you pretty much completed your portfolio of 100 cities. It's still a very new program, especially in timescales of transforming something like a city. What's on the horizon? What's next for the 100 Resilient Cities Network? Is it getting into the nitty gritty, or what are the next stages for you?
I mean, where our team is focused, where my team is focused, is really working with our chief resilience officers in the cities to advance the initiatives that they've designed and developed and put into their strategies, and actually take it from paper into reality. Resilience building, you're right, Seb, is generational. And to think that we would build a resilient city in 1 year through one organization is likely unreasonable, even though I'd love to see it happen. I think our goal here is to start these cities along their resilience journey, to help change the cities in order to think in a more resilient way as they design and develop solutions, and have them think on a systems basis to understand how to integrate resilience into their everyday lives to design the cities of the future. And that to me this is really the seeds and the shoots that we're just starting with them, because it's going to take more than in your and my lifetimes to make it happen.
You never know. I'm still young, Liz. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, our time. I know it's probably more like lunchtime, your time. Thank you so much to you guys in the audience for all your questions and your engagement. This is the end of this session, but it's very much not the end of the Disruptive Innovation Festival, which is still in just its first week. We have a lot of sessions becoming available on catch up, so make sure you check that out. Make sure you check out those sessions that Leo highlighted earlier on. And also join the conversation. You can do that either on the session pages by posting your comments, or find us in the cafe, thinkdiff.co cafe, where you can get the latest video, audio, and various updates from the Diff team and toggle over to have your say. To do all that, you'll need to create what we call a My Diff account, which is a simple 1 or 2 click login process using your Facebook, Google, or an email address and password. So thank you so much for joining us. Continue the conversation, and we hope to see you again really soon on the Diff.